Um, so the next section is really about digging into the budget development process and just some considerations to make as you are working through that piece. Oh, wow, my slides already making see. Okay. Um, so the most typical way that we develop a budget and all of our internal spreadsheets are really built around the SF424 budget categories because that's the standard budget format for federal grants here in the US. And so working from those categories typically is easy to translate to any other template as well. Um, and so this is what the actual this screenshot is the actual like PDF of the SF424. Um, not what the tool that we necessarily use to build the budget. I'll pull that up as well. Um, but I just wanted to show kind of what it looks like because this is typically what it looks like inside of an application as well. Um, So the forms themselves start with personnel costs. And I mean, the reason for that is because with any type of work, any type of business, personnel costs is your biggest chunk of the budget. It's gonna be what the vast majority of costs go towards. Um, and so we start with thinking about the key personnel, which is what we see in section A. This form only has the one line, but you can add as many as you need typically. Um, and then section B, the second section usually will address non-key research staff. And when I say non-key, doesn't mean that they're not important to making sure that the research gets conducted, but saying that these are typically not the people who would get named on a notice of award, right? These are going to be like your program director, your data analyst, graduate students, things like that.
Postdoc,
Correct.
research interviewers.
All those staff typically will fall under the other personnel section of the budget. I feel like I'm talking a lot. I was like, oh, I didn't realize how much energy that was going to take. The next category that is addressed typically is equipment, then travel, and then we kind of get into all of the other direct costs that are associated with budgets, and some of them are listed here. Um, so speaking about salary calculations and faculty and key personnel. So some major considerations when figuring out costs associated with um, faculty are what is their actual current appointment look like at the institution, right? Are they on a contract that says they get paid for 9 months or 12? I'm sorry, were you about to ask a question? I saw you unmuted. Maybe not. Okay. Um, we typically for the way that we build budgets here at Emory, we will go ahead and now I'm hot. We will go ahead and annualize the salary for um people who are on 9-month appointments. So
So,
No, let me get to, what do you mean by academic year? That's the 9 months.
Typically, that means that there's like a just the 9 months of a school year, and then there are 3 uncovered months in the summer.
Oh, okay.
like, when you're calculating your budget in the School of Public Health, we only do 12 months for most of our faculty. There could be an extreme case where we wouldn't, but most of the faculty we budget for are 12 months. a full 100% effort. We do have those faculty who may have a partial effort, who may be like a 0.75 FTE, 25, sometimes even lower than that,
That's-
but for the most part, 100% of our faculty will be 100% FTE. If somebody has a salary that is, let's say, $180,000, and they're gonna get 10% effort on the grant, it would be $18,000. Plus whatever our French rate is at that time for their effort. So,
But if for some reason, and the reason why we have to clarify what the differences are is because outside of our school, if we have other people at Emory who are working on the project, say sometimes we get data analysis from people in the computer science department, which is over in the college, the another group here at Emory, and they do have academic year appointments, right? So if they're telling me that, oh, I want this person on for 10%, and they're a 9-month appointment, I know I need to then clarify with the faculty, are you saying that you want them on for 1.2 calendar months, or are you saying 0.9? Because I would change the effort percentage that I'm calculating their salary based on to ensure that they're committing 1.2 calendar months of effort, if that's what was intended. Or if it's truly just, oh, I just want 10% of their salary, whatever calendar month commitment that is fine, then I'll adjust accordingly. But I need to know the difference to make sure that I'm actually hitting what their expectation is to hit. If I want to be sure that they're on for more than a calendar month and they only are a 9-month appointment, 10% effort is not going to get there.
So, but if you're submitting for NIH, you convert the 9 months to 12 months in a way.
so if they're doing, let's say, if they're in the college and they're the summer academic, the 9 and 3, and they say we want 10% over the 9 and 3, we would have to do 2 lines. We would have to do a summer line, which would be 0.3, and then we would have to do an academic line, which would be 0.9. And those 2 lines
Okay.
together would be the 1.2.
True.
But over there, because they don't technically get paid through the summer, it's a different calculation for them. So that's why sometimes we ask them for the budget to
Okay.
give
And
us.
sometimes they want it all in summer months. It
Yeah.
just depends on, because during the academic year, they may be teaching the whole time and they don't have effort to commit during that time. So they're like, no, I want 10%, but I want 10% of, summer months. So we need to be clear on what it is that they actually attempting to do so that we include it in the budget appropriately, because also you need to indicate that in the SF-424, if it's summer months, calendar months, or academic months, they do have you specify that in the forms. So that's why it's kind of important to know what you're dealing with for particular individuals. She already mentioned that sometimes there are partial FTEs. Now, partial FTEs, what we do is we will go ahead and annualize. And by that, I mean, we look at if they're paid a certain amount as a 0.75 FTE, we need to look at what that rate would be if they were a full FTE, because we want to make sure that we're not violating any salary cap requirements, because that has happened. I've had faculty in the School of Medicine who make enough as a 10% FTE to be over the salary cap. And that, those are the things that we have to just be aware of as we're dealing with them in the budget, to ensure that we're in compliance with any of those limitations. The other things are that you have to be careful about other appointments that people have at the institution. We really are using just institutional-based salary on budgets. And so we want to make sure that if they are clinical or they have, an addition,
Their
assistant chair or a program director or something, that additional salary is not being included in their base, because that doesn't count towards their institutional base. We also would want to know, we have a lot of people here who work with the VA because it's right up the street. And if they have VA appointments, it affects how much effort they can commit on projects because they already have an agreement in place saying that they're committing a certain amount of time to the VA. And so we would have to propose a different memorandum of agreement to the VA if we're changing what they're doing based on grant funding that potentially comes in. And then the final consideration is escalation of salary. Most of the NIH institutions and centers do not allow for escalation to be shown in budgets. And so the problem with that is that typically, not necessarily in today times, but typically over the course of a 5-year project, a faculty member salary is going to change. What they're making in year one is not going to be the same thing that 10% of their time costs in year 3, and especially not year 5. So what we try to do in order to give ourselves some wiggle room is to go ahead and look at what is their current salary, and where escalations are not allowed, we go ahead and include an extra 5% on top of their base to start off with, so that we've given ourselves room now for the course of the budget, their salary potentially going up, us still being able to get close to affording the amount of time that we're
So
It won't be such.
come again, so you assume 5% increment every year.
No, we just assume it off the initial base. So if you were making $125,000 a year now, we would assume extra 7,250 or whatever 5% is,
Correct.
and add that to the base salary and base our calculations off of that. So just in that first year.
But if in real life, the base salary at year 3 is what happens?
So we have 2 scenarios. We have what we call our escalation budget and our non-escalation budget, and we base it on the agency. So we typically, what we do to the National Cancer Institute, we escalate the salary each year for 3% for that budget that we're.
Because they allow it.
Yeah. For all other agencies, we typically will use an escalation rate of 5%.
And then hold it flat for the duration of the project.
Flat, but we have that discussion with the PI, so they know your salary is gonna be flat. In the future, you're gonna have to make an adjustment to your effort within that 25% allowable without asking the NIH for permission.
Right.
Right.
So if the amount that we can afford on the budget is, shy by 1 or 2% of your commitment, we can bring your effort down by that 1 or 2% on the project, and it still be allowable to the sponsor without a real issue. And frequently what happens is that effort kind of moves up and down on projects anyway. Oftentimes in the early years of a project, even though faculty have said, I'm going to spend 15% every year, year 1, they're probably not actually spending quite that much because a lot of it is pre-planning, getting the project kicked off. And so it may be that in year 2, now they're spending, 17, 18% on the project in order to, because now they're in the thick of the project and they have the funds there that they haven't spent from year 1, assuming we have carryover, that they can then use to increase their effort a little bit more once they're really in the thick of the project. And in order to try to keep the timeline moving forward at a pace that makes sense. But that's typically how we address it. There's usually just, if it's awarded, we make minor effort changes, where we can. In some cases, the school might cost share portions of effort, but that's rare. That's just very, very rare.
Because you have to report on it.
And then, so in terms of the non-key personnel that we include, which like I said, is typically PhD students, postdocs, and then any research staff. A couple of ways that we have to be mindful. Staff are paid and budgeted essentially the same way that faculty are. Whatever their salary is, we're going to include escalations the same way. They get the same fringe benefit rate that's been negotiated for the institution because they're full benefit employees, right? PhD students and postdocs are not. And so they're treated slightly differently. PhD students are typically paid via stipend. So that means for their participation in work on projects, normally they're getting tuition covered and, some monthly stipend that is a set amount. I think, what is it currently? 32,000.
30, I think it's 3205 or something, 3,500.
So our graduate school here sets the price for what the stipends are for PhD students, and then across the university, that's essentially what they get paid via stipend, monthly stipend. And then they're limited to 20 hours of work per week on a project. So that's essentially how they get included in budgets. And then there is no fringe benefit costs associated with their stipends, whereas postdocs do get fringe benefit costs. But they also are set on a certain pay scale. We usually budget them according to the NRSA postdoc rates. If we don't already know who the postdoc is, let me say that. So if we go into a budget preparation and we're saying, I'm going to hire a postdoc to be named later, we base it off the NRSA scale. If they have a postdoc that they already know works here, that's who they want to include on the project, then we base it off whatever that postdoc's current salary is.
And I would just say it just helps to keep it consistent so that from application to application, you're not charging different rates. And you can, if there's an audit situation, you're like, this is what our institution has deemed the base salary for this particular position.
And PhD students are now at a point where they have negotiated their rate. And I'm not laughing because it's funny. It's just one of those things that, happens over time. They are essentially cheap labor on research projects, and not cheap in the sense that, they're being discounted large sums of tuition, but cheap in the sense that what is actually paid out to them, in salary for their work via the stipend is much lower than what you would pay if you were going out to hire staff. Say if you were going to get a data analyst to do the work that a PhD student would cost, it probably is going to cost you $40,000 more annually than what a PhD student costs. So that's why, making those considerations matter. But I do think it's important because our ability to fund PhD students, right, in terms of having slots where we have PhD students who don't have to pay their tuition, is really rooted in having research grants that cover them. So, travel costs. They vary. Sometimes grants have specific travel. Like you'll see certain types of programs that'll say you have to come to Washington, D.C. once a year to meet, with the broader, spectrum of organizations participating in this to discuss your project, and you'll have to include those kind of things. But typically it varies depending on, what the work is and where it needs to be carried out. The one thing that I always encourage faculty is to be thoughtful about the accuracy of what we're including, particularly if they have work that they need to do where they're traveling out of the country. Really think it through. We want to make sure we have enough money included for what it's truly going to cost. But then I would also say, we used to have an issue where they would say, just include $15,000 worth of travel in the year for me. I'm gonna take 2 trips. And it's like, how are you including that in the budget justification? What are you saying? I'm gonna take 2 trips because if I'm the NIH, I'm not awarding you those funds, right? Because you haven't justified what trips you're taking, why it matters to the research, and why it's cost efficient for you to make these trips, right? So,
Actually, what you just said now, but sometimes we are not sure that there will be maybe a consortium meeting or other projects.
Okay.
And then you just write and say, oh, we're meeting in this country and we want you to come. So how do you manage that? Because I've experienced that before.
Well, here's the thing, you may not know specifically what country you are going to. But you will know typically that you do have to have a consortium meeting at some point in the year. And if you know it's probably an international meeting, then you can justify a fairly sizable cost for travel associated with that, right? If a typical 5-day international trip is going to cost you $7,500, including that is not a huge deal. But I think you just need to be able to then say, in your justification, we will have at least one consortium meeting at one of the partners' location that will require international travel each year. And that's usually sufficient. Where I think we run into issues, people being like, I'm probably gonna go to 2 conferences to present the data. I think I might, have to go visit a site, so just give me $20,000 a year in travel. And that's a lot harder, I think, to justify. And so I just encourage people to think in more specifics in that way, like be able to say, I'm probably going to go to a conference between one of these 4 organizations to share my early results in year 3, and definitely going to disseminate results in year 5. I know I'm going to have a meeting with my partner in year 1, 2, and 3. Then that's fine. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to know all of the specifics of it, but you just need to be able to point to kind of a number of trips, knowing if they're international or not, knowing what kind of costs might be associated with it, like knowing you have to fly. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're, relatively close and your partners are here. We do a lot of maternal health research where we partner with a maternal health center that is at the Morehouse School of Medicine here in Atlanta. You don't have to go anywhere to meet with your partners, right? So that's, yeah, you may have to have meeting costs associated with it, but you're not going to have flight costs and things like that. So just having a sense of that kind of thing. And then being sure that we consider compliant travel costs, right? We have the Fly America Act here that we have to comply with. And then also, like, I had one of our staff ask me the other day, they're like, listen, this faculty member wants to buy a first class seat on their grant. And I said they can't do it, but they're insisting that they can. And I'm like, no, of course they can. I mean, they can charge a regular, because I mean, the NIH policy says that it has to be the lowest cost, possible, right?
Yeah.
So they can charge a regular coach seat and then pay from their personal funds for the upgrade, but they cannot charge a first class seat to the grant. And I know this because I personally have a little claustrophobia. And if I go on a conference, I'm like, yeah, okay, Emory needs me to buy a coach seat, and then I'm going to use my points to upgrade the seat. But however you do it, you can finagle what you need. You just can't charge it to a federal grant, and you need to be clear on, some of those kind of things. And like I said, just, the Fly America Act and being careful about, thinking through airlines that you use, things like that. And there are instances where we have people traveling, from one continent to another. We've had people traveling between Africa and India, and there's no way they can get to the city that they're going to on a domestic airline from the US, and that's fine. We just need to say that. We can get that CAS exception and move forward. But we still just need to make sure that we are checking, because we hate to get audited and they'll be like, excuse me, no. United does fly there, and then we're like, oops. So, we just want to be mindful about those things. So one thing that I think gets confused a lot, and so I always want to be really reiterating, is that equipment costs versus material and supply costs. People constantly want to talk about computers as equipment costs. They are not equipment. Equipment really applies to things that cost $5,000 or more per unit, and most laptops and desktop computers do not cost that much. There are some instances where we have people who are analyzing big data and they have to have access to big, cores. That's different. That can fit those requirements, but typically, we're really thinking in terms of like lab equipment.
Is it still 5,000, this figure?
Mhm.
It's still there.
Yeah.
There is some news out there that it may increase, but
Yeah.
we haven't
For now.
official
Yeah.
documentation for
I
it.
mean, Kamar, how Kamar is with us, all of us, Kamar. Kamar,
I don't know if this,
Uh,
I don't know if the sound is
yeah.
working.
yeah, maybe, and I know CDC, I don't know, I was hearing that.
$10,000.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's, somebody was mentioning.
Yeah, but a lot of that, so the federal government has shut down twice in the last 12 months. And so a lot of things we've been waiting on official notifications of things that we've expected to come have taken exceptionally longer to actually come through and be put into effect because of, all of that. And I mean, between, those things and like general like cuts to a lot of these funding agencies where staffing is a lot lower, things just aren't getting done at the pace that we normally would expect them to occur. And I just want to make sure that I am specifying that the important thing is that equipment costs are things that are going to have useful life beyond a year and that initial use. They're things that you would probably have to calculate depreciation on. They're really going to be things that hold at the institution probably beyond the life of an actual grant. So material and supply costs are more of those items that are going to be, I don't want to say disposable, but things that, are one use, and then we're kind of done. It can be things like software. It can be, laptops, tablets, and the two cost items are treated differently. So that's the other important factor, right? That equipment is not included in our indirect cost base for federal grants typically. And so that's the other reason why you want to be careful about where you're including some of these items because they will affect how much indirect costs you can ultimately collect. The other thing is that people sometimes don't understand, even now, that general supplies are not material and supply costs for a grant. It takes a lot to justify something like paper being charged to a grant because those are the things that fall under indirect costs, facilities and administrative costs, right? General administrative materials like the copy machine, things like that are not allocable because when you buy that ream of paper, you can't say for sure, I'm only using this paper specifically for this particular project, or that I'm only going to use, this copier toner for this particular project. So that's why those things fall under F&A as opposed to direct material and supply costs. Now, if you're like, I have to get posters printed to advertise for this particular study because I'm trying to recruit people in, that's justifiable. But you just want to make sure that it's items that are easily allocable and are allowable to your actual study.
You okay?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Participant costs. I'm just trying to think.
You can sit down.
No. It's not even that. It's just
So when you're doing for a clinical trial, those are some of the things we might think of participant costs, most notably on T32s, things that are tuition, stipends, they have a set allocation for students. Those things would go under participant support costs in that kind of area right there. Tuition still not applicable to the IDC calculation, the other things are, but when we're looking at those things, we're looking at what does this particular RFA allow in terms of these particular participants for costs. So, and, these are not like when you're giving a participant incentive, if you're going out in the community, doing a survey and you're asking them, oh, I'm gonna give them $25, that does not go into this.
Those aren't support costs,
Yeah,
but those
those
are
are-
participant costs, so you might still include them on a participant line item in a budget, but they are different by definition than necessarily the incentives. And they differ also from what are patient care costs. And I say that because we sometimes have studies where like our unit also used to support the nursing school and had a faculty member whose work really was about dental health during pregnancy. And so there would be like this dentist who was a partner. Hey, Malika, I'll get back to you. Um, there would be this dentist who's a partner and they are doing, a cleaning, an x-ray and a check. And those are actually like the cost for some of those things are actually what we would consider patient care costs. So those are like routine services that are offered by those medical providers, hospitals, like sometimes like MRI.
Anything that we might consider what we call generate a DCR code, which is a billable expense that would generate a bill that the insurance or the patient would have to pay.
And it's important to note the difference because these are costs that are not included in the IDC rate as well. So you want to make sure that the things that specifically need to be pulled out of the modified total direct costs for the calculation of indirect costs, that you're coding them appropriately in the way that you include them in the budget, because if not, then you're overcharging on IDC and they will catch that. Oh, so my favorite topic. And I say this is my favorite topic because it is especially coming up quite a bit in the conversations now about foreign collaborations. Now that we've kind of moved to a different model for not using foreign subawards and really having direct awards going to our foreign partners. Because those who are not, we have people who work with foreign universities, but then we also have people who work with foreign NGOs that really don't have, a robust support system and infrastructure to really do all the things that are required to submit a grant that would get directly awarded to them from the federal government. And so in those instances, we have a lot of people saying, well, can they just be a consultant? And I'm like, what are they doing on the project? Because we can't really decide how we categorize our partners based on, what's convenient for us to put together in a proposal application. It really comes down to the work that they're actually being involved in on the project. And I have seen instances where the NIH in particular, but other, agencies will come back and be like, we're not gonna approve this because this is not a consultant. Consultants are people who are really just providing expert advice or guidance on a project. So they may look at your study and give you some guidance on protocol because they're an expert in this particular type of research, or they may be reviewing the final write-up, that type of activity. But they are not actively involved in carrying out any of the specific aims on the project. They're not in charge of or able to make any decisions with respect to your scope of work or deliverables or any like major portions of the study, right? Like they don't have oversight of any portions of the study. Now, a subrecipient, on the other hand, is an entity. They're performing their own basically scope of work, or set of objectives under the award, right? They are charged with this piece of the project that they are carrying out. So that means they have programmatic responsibility. They can make decisions about that. They are probably using resources at another institution or facility, right? So if you're working at a university and you're going to be a consultant, you have to be careful because whatever you're doing cannot be like, but I'm using my students from the lab at, so and so. That it has to be an individual's consulting expertise in order to count as a consultant. And then fee for service, which is the final category that we sometimes get confused, are typically more like vendors. What they provide are services that they basically would provide in their normal scope of work to anybody who comes in. So in other words, a lab, for instance, can be fee for service because they provide this testing to anyone who comes in and pays for their service. It's not necessarily specific to the research. They're not designing and developing something specific to this project. They don't really require any direction from the investigators. It's like, I'm just sending this here for the typical, blood tests that they normally run. And they normally are people who would invoice and receive payment upon delivery of, whatever it is that they're providing. And like I said, they are operating in a competitive environment where anybody who can come in and pay for the services is able to acquire those same services. So it's not I'm just setting up shop for you on this project kind of thing. Does all that make sense?
Yeah.
Do you have?
So how are you dealing with this new NIH, directive of sub-award, with LMIC? So I said, we are doing it now.
Good question. We have not had a submission cycle yet where this stuff goes through. So the first cycle for those P5 applications will be May 25th. So that'll be the first deadline in which we have them. So we're just kind of starting to work on that piece. And not strangely, like I said, I guess it's typical for this current environment that we still haven't seen like what the application looks like the application package for the actual funding to know all of the specifics of the application package. We've seen the funding announcements, which say, what is required, but to me, I need to see the form as well because that tells me things about the format of certain information, right? Like you are asking me to write up a thing, but am I uploading it? Is it like a 30-line copy and paste? Like I need more specifics in order to really hone out some of the things that we are going to do, and they just are not there yet. I know our Office of Sponsored Programs has been meeting with the Federal Demonstration Project and other people, like really trying to tease out some of the guidelines there so that we can have, an institutional approach for how we're going to handle it. In the meantime, what we've been trying to do really is just advise our partners, our foreign collaborators, to do all of the registrations and things that are going to be required for them to have because they take time. And so people who don't, by example, have a UEI number, or if they don't have an ORCID account, because those are going to be required. They have to be linked to an ERA Commons ID. And we're encouraging people to set up Science CV because they will need Common Forms versions of biosketches and other support documents. So since all of those things are things that they can start working on now, we're trying to, help partners kind of work through that, provide whatever instructions and guidance we can for how to get those pieces set up on their end. But some of that piece is out of our control in terms of what, other institutions are able to get done. But that's been our starting point for now.
And as you imagine, we have a lot of questions from faculty about this whole week, so we're trying to work with them as much as possible.
And the thing is with the large institution though, is that you have to have, an institutional response to how you're going to handle particular things, because we can't decide at Rollins, oh, for this explanation that they need about, the foreign collaboration, this is how we're going to handle it. And then the School of Medicine does something totally different, right?
Big because of how many forms are supposed to calculate
Together. Right. So those are other things that we want to see, like how is all that going to come together in the budget form? Because that, that will all matter for us in the long run. But I mean, it's a lot to consider. And like I said, we're probably the school at the institution with the most foreign collaborations, I would say. It's tough in public health, I'll just say that, because we also have been dealing with the most in terms of like the things that are now not funding priorities, like, the things that they're stepping away from in order to fund other things supposedly, has really been a redistribution of, certain work that we would have already had funded. So it's really a big pivot point for us, on the whole, to try to, figure out where where we're going next.
For us, for the faculty, it's
Yeah.
just the fact that we had terminated because of their focus. We've had to, reshift some things around in order to keep funding. So it's been an interesting 12 months. to say the least.
So anyway, without dwelling too much on that. So this is the last part of the budget section that I'm gonna go through. Just talking about indirect costs, and we've touched on a lot of this a little bit, but I just cannot overemphasize the importance of indirect costs and making sure that you are collecting as much of your negotiated rate as you possibly can be. Because it is, like I said, it's the way that the university budgets fund quite a bit of expenses in terms of overhead costs and administrative costs, for the institution, particularly associated with research, but just in general, right? Whenever you're doing research, it costs money to, have the lights on, have the labs cleaned, have things disposed of. All of those things have costs associated with them. And the university and the tuition that it collects cannot really fully cover all of those costs if we are not collecting enough indirects. Typically, those costs are going to be a percentage of whatever the direct costs are on the budget. So they really will work out to, if you have 750,000 in direct costs, some percentage of that on top of it will go towards indirects. Typically, that's based on a rate that's negotiated with your organization's cognizant agency. In our case, it is the Department of Health and Human Services. And we have multiple rates that are agreed to depending on the type of project and where the preponderance of the research is occurring. So by that, I mean, if you look at our most recent negotiated rates, and I say recent, and it's all the way back to FY24. But that's because we're still waiting on our notice from the federal government of our negotiated rate from last year. So that's another thing that has happened with, government shutdowns, processes like that, where we had gone all the way through our cost accounting office had gone all the way through the process of negotiating our rate. And we were like, just waiting on the letter, and we still haven't received it. So that is interesting in the sense that it means that, you know, we're just holding on old rates currently for both indirect costs and fringe, right?
Yeah.
But so organized research is the typical rate that's charged on most research projects. And you know, the only times that we pivot from that, so one good example is we have a center that's, are they still on this floor? I think they moved up to the 8th floor, but in the behavioral science and health education department, we have a center that trains trainers around heart and diabetes health, and they have contracts with the federal government, various states, about lifestyle guidance and all of these other things that they work to train people on to improve around those chronic diseases. But that is what we would consider technical assistance. And so their work typically falls under other sponsored activities as opposed to actual research. They're not, you know, conducting research per se. They're doing more of putting the research to work out in the community. Instruction is really, really rare. I would say we almost never use that.
Yeah.
It's excuse me, for grants that are to fund courses that are actually taught here on campus. But even training grants don't really, it wants to come so bad. I'm sorry. The sneeze is like right there. But the other major factor is, and this is why you see split categories under each of those columns. So across the top where it says, you know, whether it's organized or other sponsored or instruction, then below that you have 3 categories for each one, and that's relative to the location of the research. So we have a rate that applies to that work as it occurs on campus. And then if that work is off campus but not far, so we call it off campus adjacent, where it's you know, research that occurs within 50 miles of our campus. And then lastly, off campus rate, which is anything further than 50 miles, and is typically a much lower indirect cost rate. No questions? Okay. Oh, I forgot about this one. No, I forgot that I just forgot that it was on here. I was like, oh, I thought it was done. So one thing that, and this really even still confounds members of our team sometimes, is the modular budgets that NIH allows. Most of the budgets that you do for any foundation, any corporation are going to be detailed. Even the vast majority of NIH and other federal budgets are going to be detailed, but there is a small category of budgets that are modular. These are generally for NIH submissions where direct costs are less than $250,000 a year. In that case, budgets are created in modules of $25,000. So that means if you're coming up with your direct cost for the budget, and we usually encourage people to think in terms of detailed costs, we just don't have to justify detailed costs, right? So we say, if you're thinking through all of your costs and it comes up to $226,000,
Yeah.
we're still going to tell you to request $250,000 in modules in that year, and that additional $24,000.
Okay, because they don't need you to justify it. I mean,
Right.
yeah, okay, so
You don't have to you don't have to justify
So,
it.
I have the margin.
Yeah. So the only thing that you have to include in the justification for modular budgets are personnel costs. And then, and when you think about it, it makes sense, because if you think about how much personnel costs on most awards involves annually, you're gonna get pretty close to at least half of that $250,000. Like, I rarely have I seen it be much less than, you know, 125 or so. So that's the reason why for these smaller direct cost budgets. They just allow you to justify the personnel costs and request in those modules. And I will say, let me back up just to say this. That doesn't mean that if you have an award and you're spending significantly less than the modules that you requested, that isn't a problem, right? So you still want to think about your direct costs and getting them, making sure they're close in total to the number of modules that you are requesting, because you can request modules in any combination of $25,000 up to the 250, right? So maybe you only need 125. But just know that you don't have to get, when you're working through the cost, you don't have to get the full $25,000 of a module spent out in your mind before you request it. But you don't want to have so much that you end up with, if you are requesting the whole 250 and then your carryover is $75,000 every year, that's a problem, right? Like that's showing that you don't know how to budget from the NIH perspective. They're thinking you don't know how to budget. We may lower the amount awarded to you in future years because you've overestimated your costs quite significantly. You can't spend what you've requested. They're going to start questioning things like, are you really doing the full scope of what you propose? Things like that. So you don't want to be so off in what you request that you've raised questions. So the things that usually require detailed budgets, obviously, is anything where the annual direct costs are more than that $250,000. Historically, for most research mechanisms, that has meant that you can request $499,999 a year in direct costs annually, unless the RFA specifically stated something else. And then to request larger amounts, you would have had to get prior approval. However, the NIH has released a notice that has said you do not have to request prior approval to have a budget with direct costs that exceed $500,000. Now, what is unclear is if those requests for larger amounts are going to be reviewed in the same way. We don't know. We don't know if it's like, oh, they requested more than $500,000, put them to the side, and different reviewers are gonna we just don't know how those are going to be treated. So I still caution people to be thoughtful and mindful about if what they're requesting and what they're budgeting for can truly be justified and it makes sense, and it's still efficient. It means to me, don't just go crazy because you can, right?
Thing for us, we're still recommending that if they're able, that they reach out to the PO for that agency that they want to submit to just, feel out if that agency would fund something that high, even though they don't technically have to ask for permission to do so.
And I think really in any way that you can establish a decent relationship with the program officer for a program before you apply is helpful. So it never hurts to reach out with questions, right? And then the other important piece, like we said, is that justifications have to provide a detailed explanation of every expense category in detailed budgets, right? So that means we also have to include language that justifies our indirect cost rate. We have lines that are standard that we put in that says, Emory will be charging indirect costs at 56.5% of our direct costs based on our federally negotiated rate with our cognizant agent. That is boilerplate language that we include so that we are ensuring that we are giving a detailed explanation of every single line item. Anything that isn't included in the indirect cost base, we're mentioning that in the justification. Like if we say tuition, we have tuition fees that are associated with PhD students, right? So we charge stipend, and then there's a fee amount of $10,000 some odd dollars annually that we charge along with that to the grants. That is an allowable cost, but is also not something that we can include in the indirect cost base. So when we justify it, we make sure that we spell that out in the justifications, so that it is clear what we have and what we have not included, so that if somebody were to go back and check all of the math, and lately they have been, on our budget, everything makes sense to how we got to our calculations. And I say lately they have been because we've had some prams come up where, they're asking us, they've changed a number and they're like, it looks like you included this in the indirect cost base and it shouldn't be. And we've had to go back and, argue for why that's not correct, or they missed something, or, whatever. So they are checking budgets in a great deal of detail at this point. Excuse me. All right, I think I'm done. All right, you wanna break for a second? Or? Okay. All right, we're gonna take a brief break and I'll mute Zoom for the moment, and then no,
Come on. Okay. Come on.
it might be a sound thing.
No, I guess it's there. It's.
Yeah, and it sounded like he was trying to say something, but
If he has questions, let me quickly come next.
Yeah. Hello?
hi, we heard you just then. That's the first time we heard you. Okay, we just wanted to make sure you didn't have any questions. Well, we're taking this brief break and then we should be back in probably by 10:40.
Oh, no problem.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Okay. All right. So a lot of what Jamila talked about, the budget, meeting with the PIs are a lot of the components that we go through, but the other part of the equation is always putting together the application and bringing all the pieces together. So when she was talking about meeting with the PI and we're talking about checklists and timelines, the budget is part of what she said is the core part. So a lot of what the core is going to go into the proposal preparation process. Okay, so here at Emory, we have what we call a system to system. We use Cayuse. A lot of people who are outside of Emory, they may use other system to systems, but the main site to find your grant application or the funding opportunity announcement is going to be grants.gov. And this is where we're going to go to obviously pull down the application, fill out the package. For us, we don't typically use that simply because in using grants.gov, it's not easily shareable. So we want to be able to give people access to the application. I'm sorry, like you be telling you're feeling fine. Um, So for our system to work, it has to be able to speak to grants.gov because the application, it has to pass through certain checks and balances and pass through grants.gov into ERA Commons, where eventually you will see the finished product of the application. And we ask that the PI goes in and does a final check of that application once it's in to make sure it looks good. And this is why we use the timeline because of that 2-day correction window. So if we're able to get it in early and somebody sees, oh, it's an issue, you can go back in and make any changes, right? Uh, let's stop laughing at Malika. And then we've had applications, if you can believe it, go in as late as 4:59 on a submission due date. So we try and avoid those situations if possible, because they're stressful for the PI, they're stressful for the RA, and they're stressful for OSP, who has to submit over 100 applications in any submission cycle. Right, so let's see. I need to close the button. And, oh, let me see, did it? Oh, okay, there it is. So I'm going to go through a couple of things so that you can see our systems. You can see an application. Usage. Huh, it is. All right, so let me just log into Cayuse.
And Cayuse is what we call system to system application developer. So it's a software that translates and transforms into grant.gov.
So this was developed by Ed.
No, this is a company that sells the institutional.
Okay. What? Oh, you bought the package.
Yes.
And there are other companies out there that do the same thing. It just happens that we use Cayuse. We've used it for over 15 years now. So, we've become quite familiar with using Cayuse. Let's see. Okay. So, as Jamila was saying, parts of the application package are obviously the budget. But then there are these other sections that we also go through as well. So we're just going to talk about some of these sections. So obviously we have what we call the SF 424 packet. We have what we call the cover page, and it is hard for this little screen on the big screen. And your application package basically lays out what institution is submitting it, not the PI, what institution is submitting the application, who is the authorized representative who would be involved in any communication about the application. In this case, it's our director of grants, but we have a central email box where any notices come in. So it's not going to any one person. It's going to that email box for everybody to have access to in that office, right? What type of application is this? Is it new, resubmission, renewal? And then are there anything special about this application? If it's a resubmission, you're going to get other things that are going to pop up. We have this great tool right here in Cayuse, which tells us about any errors or warnings that we need to pay attention to. So anytime we click a button, you might see a different error pop up. So if I go from new, you'll see the errors go down. But if I go to resubmission or renewal or continuation or revision, you see the errors kind of change and the warnings change with the package. And then obviously, what is your descriptive title of the application within the title parameters that the NIH has set? And what are the dates of the proposed application? This is all part of cover page 1. Cover page 2 is basically who is the PI? Who is going to be leading the research? Who is the person that we're communicating with, right? The next part is what is the estimated funding? This is pre-populated from the budget pages, so there's nothing manually that we have to put in here. This is all pulled in from the back. Do any of these things?
So the KUs,
Mhm.
you also put your budget in the KUs.
Correct, we do.
Oh,
Yes,
Because this is what's actually submitted to the sponsor. This is putting together the package.
that goes to your OSP.
correct.
And then ultimately to, CDC or whomever.
So I was KU, so when you click, it now goes to the NIH fund. That's, let me understand how it works.
So it passes through grants.gov to ERA Commons, and then once it gets to ERA Commons with no errors, you'll see, I can show you what it looks like, but we're looking for it to go all the way through to ERA Commons through grants.gov with the checks and balances. And then once it's there, then the review committee, they assign it to a particular review.
Yeah, but my question is, you said KUs is a package you bought.
Correct.
And it's in the market.
Correct.
But, so this package is interoperable with the council of government.
Correct. Correct. But there are other packages out there, other systems out there that are also called system to system that act in the same way as Cayuse. Emory just decided to purchase Cayuse after reviews. Like Workday, yes.
We are getting ready in a few minutes to move to a different one that is being developed by the Vulcan Plan. But there are several companies out there that do the same thing, and essentially the purpose of it is to ease the process of filling out the information and instead of it being like you editing a PDF. Which is what you would do essentially if you were working directly through Grants.gov, right? You download PDF.
Yep.
In the PDF. You're working in the system, which allows you to make changes more easily than PDF program would. And then also, like she said, it gives you the additional tool of checking, like you see at the bottom, it's validating what agency is next to the error number is showing that the agency we're submitting to is NIH. So the errors and warnings that is provided are based on the validations for NIH. If this will go to a different agency, we would populate that with the other agency that it was going to. Or typically that's populated on its own based on the RFA that you choose, right? So if I chose to start the application for a DoD submission, we would say DoD whether in it's
So it's really good, it's something we should Okay.
Yeah. And you want a package that is able to tell you if there are any errors or warnings, because you want to catch those before you hit the submit button in this case. And the good thing about this is that in grants.gov, you have to give people permission to see your application. This, because it's packaged for Emory, whoever, like I started this application, but it's easy for me to grant people on my team permission. I can add users here. But at the central office, they have automatic access to every application that goes through the system. Much easier than grants.gov. So that's one of the reasons for using it. But if you've used grants.gov, this basically follows the same premise. So, we have the SF424 package, we have the PI, we have the authorized representative for the university. Part of this is also complying to say you don't have any, lobbying agreements. You don't have any criminal civil penalties. And then who is the authorized representative as well, who is going to talk about this application? Teresa is over the whole unit, but then you may have different people who kind of work with this specific PI and will answer any questions here, right? So then we come to what are your performance sites, right? For this particular application is Emory. We don't have any subs. We don't have any external sites. So it's just Emory. And this can be pre-populated based upon how you fill out the PI information.
Well, another thing is that the system has this information saved for every university, so that we don't have to fill out every time.
Yeah, okay, if it's Emory.
Or, but I'm saying whoever uses it.
Yeah.
like, once you populate the information for your institution once, every time you pull up a new application, this stuff will already pre-populate, so that it saves, so it's just.
Like, you
Correct.
review, move on.
And
Correct.
you can do the same thing for individual investigators, you can show you the person section, but you can save information for individual investigators as well, so that every time that person is included in the grant, you don't have to continue to.
Correct. Yeah. Then we get to the other project information, correct? So I don't know, does when you're doing an application, you're checking yes to human subjects
Yeah.
and non-exempt, correct? So then right now, if we say no, then it's going to change the status, right? If we change yes, and it's giving me that warning because I put in a human subjects, already populated that for this application. So that's why it's giving me that warning. Vertebrate animals, same thing. So it's just answering the questions. If you answer yes or no, it's going to ask you for additional information for all purposes. If we're doing a foreign application, we have a foreign subcontractor, we have a foreign collaborator, foreign consultant, we're going to check yes. We're going to say what country are they from, and we can put an optional explanation here, but in other words, it will ask us for a foreign justification as part of this documentation. And when stuff like this pops up, we have to be sure that we're giving the information in the way that they want it. So they say foreign justification, we need to upload a document that says foreign justification, just like this right here. If we say foreign space justification, the system is going to count that as an error, right? So these are some of the things that are kind of great about having a system that we can kind of just like drop documents in. Project summary abstract. One of the things that I recommend is that when you're putting together the applications, in addition to reading the funding opportunity announcement, you use the NIH guides. The NIH guides are just really great. They rewrite them all the time, mostly every year. And it's just a definite play-by-play of everything that goes in this application, the table of contents. They're hyperlinked. They take you directly to each section, to each individual component of each section, and they give you additional information about what's required. Yeah, some other agencies are not as detailed, but the NIH has gotten that really well. Okay. And then there are examples out there, PDF examples of just like the blank application as well, that have different components that you can also look at. So these are things that we, and if there are special considerations, like if you're doing a K award, The K guideline will tell you if there are certain things that are really applicable to a K grant or an F grant or a T grant or a U grant. So, right. And then in special RFAs, we're paying attention to other attachments, not necessarily if there is a foreign justification, if we don't have a foreign component to it, but are there special documents that need to be uploaded for that one? I have a grant that's going in now, and we need not necessarily individual other supports, but we need a table of other support for all of the faculty that are going to be involved with that application. So that means that we have to put that on our checklist. We have to make sure that we're allowing enough time to gather that information and to put that document together to make sure that it complies with the funding opportunity announcement guidelines. And the funding opportunity announcement will take precedent over the application guide if there's something special there.
How do you the awards that you currently have? Is there a finance system where that information is collected, or how
But ethos is Kamar. I think that question we will talk about to.
Where?
Yeah. Kamar,
Oh.
are you with us? Maybe you can repeat the question.
Myra?
Yeah, I'm with you.
So there's a question for you. Maybe you repeat that.
how are you keeping track of the existing awards that you all have at the institution? Is there like a financial software that you're tracking the information in, or how is that managed currently?
Did you hear the question?
She's speaking from afar.
Oh, okay. So how are you,
Yes,
how are
yes.
you tracking? How are you tracking your applications? Are you using a system, financial systems?
They're asking that.
You mean tracking the application that we've submitted?
Or current awards.
Correct.
Awards that we
And
have.
awards, what type of financial systems are you using to track your awards?
Yeah. Currently, the major one, our major grant is the CDC grant, and majorly the tracking is done through there's what they call grant management module. We use it to track the award, but for other smaller awards, it's majorly through an internal Excel format that we use internally, but it's not very robust. But it's customized to suit a particular grant or something like that. Yeah.
And I was only asking because I was curious about when you have to provide information on other support.
Pardon?
Excuse me. So when you have to provide information on other support for your investigators, like how much effort they have on a grant, how much the grant total is that part of the spreadsheet that you're using to track these awards and how much has been spent?
Yes. Yeah. We track other support by we try to get all the grants each person is associated with, and it is out of that, under normal circumstances, is supposed to be on 100%, and each and every grant is allocated normally is at the beginning of the year. Each time and effort of an individual is calculated to and monitored accordingly.
Okay.
But at times, my concern is that you find this challenge of somebody, though officially not documented, but somebody might end up working more than the time and effort allocated, but without a commensurate payment for that, if I may say, because where you say somebody is working on a time and effort of let's say 100% per month, for example, which is normally an 8 to 5 hour work. But if you look at it critically, at times you discover that some people even work more than that 8 to 5 hour. But in reality, there is no system in place um,
Capture more than that.
to pay those extra hour, especially if somebody is not a very junior staff.
Okay. And is it just one spreadsheet or is the spreadsheet by PI? Kamara? Oh, thank you.
Sorry.
Oh,
Yeah. It's a spreadsheet that covers all the grants that we are operating, so that at the end of the day, you see Mr. A is on maybe 5% on Reliance Award, uh, 80% on Comprehensive Award, and another 15%, for example, on our Phase 3 award. It totals the total amount for the um, level of time and effort for a particular step from the beginning to the for the beginning of the year to the end of the year for each of the for any award that is in place as at then.
okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
So
So let me ask, this KUs, is there a way, because to me this makes life easier.
yeah, it does.
Is there a way we can push for this KUs?
Yeah. I'm in particular.
Because it makes life easy for you, especially.
Yeah. I'm trying to. I was briefing our deputy CEO operations this morning about what actually transpired yesterday, and I was actually informing him that we've observed that there are softwares that will make our life easy, because yesterday we went through some of this, like the insight grant
Okay.
management and the rest. In particular, I would like, if it is possible for you, Dr. Banjo, to have a feel of all this, not KUs in particular. Just go through, if it's possible, to have
So they're
a
raising
feel
up.
of
This is the KUs that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And others, so that we might select one or two that will be much more will make our work easy. He welcomed the idea actually when I briefed him. He actually welcomed the idea. I think we should go through and see what best fit. You know our organization better and what fits. Yeah. Thank you. Mm.
Thank you.
They aren't cheap systems, right? But I do think, if you are looking to grow your portfolio, it starts with the volume of proposals that you can.
Yeah.
We, would say, average between 50 and 60 proposals a month.
Yes.
That's it for our school. Across the institution. It's a lot of volume.
It is a lot of work. So then we go to key persons, and obviously this is all of the key persons, as Jamila said, who are involved with your application, your PI, MPI, co-I. Sometimes you have your collaborator, your contributor, and some faculty do like to put other staff on there. It's not required. Sometimes they may put a postdoc on there and they want to include the bio sketch. Anytime you want to include somebody's bio sketch, they have to be listed in the key persons category, even if they're not necessarily a PIPD, we would consider them other, and then we would do an other project category for that person in this case, if we need to supply their bio sketch for the application as additional justification why this person is needed for the grant, right? Why their effort is needed for the grant. So say that again.
Most often we
Oh.
use that for consultants and mentors.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. And then this is where your biographical sketch would go. And then not all need current and other pending support, mostly training grants. You would see the current and pending support. And like we talked about Science CV, I'll show you, that side in a minute so you can just see what it looks like. After that is the full detailed budget that Jamila went over previously. As you can see, it's laid out just the way she showed you in terms of the personnel. And then the next section too is what, oh, sure.
So you can see where the options are there for academic salary and summer salary, but because all of our faculty are 12 months, we use calendar year. If you have people who are paid for academic, you can also use that option. You may want to click on the actual key person.
No.
So one of the things that I was saying is that you can save people in here with their profiles and their base salary. So if I have entered a key person into the system, I might put that their appointment is 9 months of academic, and then they can have the option of whether bring up 6 months back. And then I have saved their base salary in there as well. And so that anytime I add them to a grant, that information is pre-populated, and all I have to do is put the effort that I'm going to put. And over there to the far left side of the steps on. The steps. I'll get it.
Oh, right here.
The escalation.
Oh. Where is the,
By period 1.
Oh. Hold on, let me change this back for a second. So.
Right, but you can also do it just.
Oh, you know what?
Salary escalation. So. Find out.
Oh, which way am I going, Jamila?
It's my left, your right side.
Oh, sorry. Oh, right here. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay, here we go.
So if we were escalating a person within the salary, this is how we can automate that. We just.
It doesn't take you on to.
And then the system, they load our fringe rate, so we don't ever change that unless we have a fringe rate for somebody who's in the School of Medicine, an MD. That fringe rate is not in here because the system can't distinguish between faculty and MDs automatically. So the base rate in here is typically for faculty and staff. So then we do a manual adjustment if we have anybody who's an MD and has a lesser fringe rate.
But once we do that, they're able to calculate the cost every year for that. We don't have to go through and manually enter each year yourself.
And then I like to use this one, especially if we're doing a budget and there are other costs that don't change over time. And this is the other way, not just in the salary, where you can escalate across other categories as well.
Typically.
Mhm.
Bills.
Mhm.
That's what most categories, but tuition would be,
Correct. Or you can keep them flat and you can take out the escalation and just use the replicate. And then it will replicate that cost across all of them. Just have to zero these out and choose which categories you need it to replicate across, and then for what periods. So other personnel, and then it just basically follows the same format that Jamila showed you: equipment, travel, participant support costs.
So let me ask, before you put them here on this case, do you do them on Excel?
Yes,
Or
yes,
you use Excel to fill this?
correct, correct. You can, if you like that, you can put it directly in here if you like to do that, but we like to do Excel because we go back and forth with the PIs over the budget, to make sure the costs look correct. And then this would be kind of like one of the last steps that we would do. And then obviously here's a summary. It summarizes it across all years, so you can double check against what you expected your numbers to look like, especially for each category. And so then we get to human subjects. And for your subjects, for your study, do you have IRB approval for your studies? Okay. So then part of that is filling out the PHS human subjects and clinical trial information form. So for us, we can fill it out in the system, but we actually have a PDF that we like to send to the faculty for them to fill it out, and then we just upload it. So that is part of our human subjects form. And obviously, I don't know, is any of the work that you do clinical trial related or non-clinical trial?
No.
Okay, so then in that case, we ask the PIs, we say, if you're a clinical trial related, then you have to complete all sections of the form. But if it's a non-clinical trial, then you only have to fill up to section 3. And then there are only certain things that really have to be filled out in section 3 that are required for the application. And the same as the bigger part of the Cayuse file, the human subjects file also has its own errors and warnings as well. And as Jamila was saying, you could do a modular budget, you can do a detailed budget. So one of the other things that we have is the option, if we're doing a modular budget, we can check modular budget only, and then take out the R&R budget, and we can just submit our modular budget, which we typically do for our R21s and R03s or other announcements that specifically say they need a modular budget only, right? Subaward budget attachments. We have subawards. We have SF424 form in PDF format. We can manually upload it here, and we request that our subcontractors fill that form out because we don't want to have any errors in completing that form. We obviously have to check it when we get it back against what our internal budget is to make sure that things are correct. A case in point, I got subcontract paperwork yesterday. The SF424 form was filled out, but the salary wasn't filled out. But, a cost calculation, I knew one of the faculty was at the cap, and the salary costs were more than what the cap would allow at that particular effort. So we had to go back to the sub and say, can you fill out the salary for it so I could verify? And then once that was filled out, I said, well, you're calculating the salary at the cap at this % effort, but you have more on your SF424 form than what's allowable by the NIH. So we need you to bring your costs down to within the cap. So these are some of the things that we look at and how we use the SF420 form. And we send our subcontractors a package. We say, these are the things that we need from the subcontract as a package to get back for us to fill out their subaward portion of the budget. This can also be done manually. So you can create a subaward manually as well. Just enter the subaward name, and then you're going to populate all of the other information for that subaward, the UEI number, enter the PI's name. But this part can lead to errors, so we don't typically use that. We like to use the, yes, because that causes less errors on the back end. Cover page supplement, these are additional questions, especially if you're doing vertebrate animals. You have some more questions that you have to answer here. You know, are you following the euthanasia guidelines? Are you following good clinical care guidelines when it comes to treatment of animals? Is there program income? If you're doing a conference grant, let's say, and you're putting on a conference, there may be income. If you're doing a conference grant and there's income, that means that the NIH could potentially take that income and count it against future year award allocations because you have income, right? So you want to be sure that you're checking that either yes or no. Are you doing stem cell research? If you're doing stem cell research, then there are additional guidelines that have to come in. You have to say, what is your stem cell line? There's additional paperwork that has to be included in the application. So these are things that we're asking the PI. Is there human fetal tissue section? Is there human fetal tissue in your research? This requires additional uploads. And then this section right here is typically more so for renewals, for transfer applications or change in PIs or change in institutions. So very seldom do we use the cover page to supplement. Those are more or less specific circumstances.
And
So
one example, a long existing training grant, a T32 that we have recently processed a renewal for, and the faculty member who's been the PI of the training grant is retired, and so another faculty.
and then this right here is part of the basic section where we're asking the PI for all of these documents, right? We're saying, okay, is it a resubmission? Is it a revision? We need to have an introduction to the application. What are the specific aims of your application? What is your research strategy? Does your research strategy comply with the type of submission that you're doing? If you're doing an R21, is it only 6 pages long? If you're doing a R01, you have a max of 12 pages. Is it a renewal? We need a progress report publication list in that case. If you're doing vertebrate animals, we need the justification for vertebrate animals here. Are you doing select agent research? What type of select agent research are you doing? We need a document stating that as well. Is it multiple PI? You know, what are you going to do in the event that you have these multiple PIs and somebody has to drop off? How are you communicating with each other? Are there subcontracts? Who are the subcontractors? What is their scope of work in this particular application? Letters of support. Not everybody wants to include letters of support. They're not required. Sometimes some applications do require letters of support. So who are your letters of support from? If you have a consultant, do we have their letter of support? In their letter, are they stating that they're a consultant? If you have a contributor, are they supplying a letter? What does their letter say? We've gotten letters from people who are who might be listed on the grant one way, but they actually should be a consultant, and they might have written a letter a specific way. So we're reviewing these things and we're saying, well, in so-and-so's letter, they state this, but what you told us was this right here. This was their role, or a title may be different, right? So we're checking all of these things. Is research sharing an option here? Are you sharing technology? Are you developing a lot of things that comply with the resource sharing plan? Is your budget over 500K, which is a requirement for having a resource sharing plan? A data management plan. This is a new, within the last, 2 years requirement for NIH applications. Everybody has to have a data management and sharing plan. Are you doing lab work? You need an authentication of key biological and or chemical resources, right? Are you doing an appendix? Does it comply with the appendix guidelines? Are you doing blank questionnaires? Nothing filled out. We don't do publications. I can remember back in the day where applications were 400 pages, right? So this is now a way to cut down on that. They're saying we only want to see these things in this particular section of the application. And then where is your application going to be reviewed? Do you have an assignment for your application, or do you want it to just go in without an assignment and have the scientific review committee assign it to a particular agency for you. Most people prefer to assign their application to a particular NIH component and have a suggested study section for review in this case. And then down here, you can provide a rationale not required, keywords or expertise, and then individuals who should not review your application because of potential conflicts of interest. And then part of this,
This is like some of what plays into that, right? Because you then understand who should be reviewed, not necessarily the individuals, but like which are the correct review panels that they should go in front of in order for you to be more likely to be funded. And the people who have served in the review panels for have a strong sense like this was right, that this has the right expertise to understand what I'm presenting. And so in that way, it's not necessarily about, oh, you know, because I have this relationship with the family, they come to me, but it is what you've developed from your interactions over time has given you more knowledge of how to best present your work system. Yeah. And I also wanted to say back in the research plan section, one great thing about having a system like Cayuse is that if this were an R21 and I tried to upload a research strategy that is 7 pages, it's gonna
It will accept this.
give me an error and turn red, and I'm like, no. And sometimes it's not as simple as they wrote too much. Sometimes it's like the conversion of the document from a Word document to a
PDF, yes.
Extended it by a line or a couple of words or whatever. And so it's going ahead and giving us that warning so that before we get too far in the process, we know we can go and cut something and make sure.
Correct. Any questions about this? Cayuse, since you,
That's it's a good platform. My question, I don't know if you know,
okay,
like I said, organization is not like purely academic. We do some academic with universities,
mhm,
both local and international, but we're more of a program organization. So from your thoughts, you said that other passions, other
systems,
systems,
yes,
because cost will be a consideration.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Because
definitely.
what we can what this kind will likely be very expensive.
Uh,
Do you have an idea?
I do not, unfortunately, but
The specific numbers are, the cost packages, I would say you have to look and see which
mhm,
other types of systems really best serves
Oh,
your process, right? Because this is probably actually a cheaper version of Cayuse, to be frank with you, that we're using right here, because the full version of what they offer has award management stuff associated with it, like it has modules that expand to workflow for approvals within the institution. This is really the bare bones of just system to system proposal. So this is actually probably a cheaper version of what Cayuse does. A more expanded version probably has, all sorts of other elements to what they do. And Kennesaw State University, I see scrolling at the bottom, doesn't have nearly the portfolio. It was a really not portfolio. Nowhere close to that, but they submit enough grants to where this is useful for them, and they have some version of the suite that they are putting into use. But you can see that they also have like hospitals.
Yeah, like look at it.
Right.
Look at it, it's like it looks like an NGO. Just look
Yeah.
at it.
Yeah.
So, a variety of different types of.
So actually, when I get back to Nigeria, we'll discuss we reach out to many and hear them out.
Yes.
What suits
Cause they will come and do a whole, so like,
Yeah,
Yeah, that presents.
we are going through a process right now for our financial system for the institution, which is why Malika's not here. Because the institutions have the demonstration on different financial software. They are presenting what their various softwares can do so that we can then, I say we, and by that I mean shareholders across the institution who deal with the financial suite can see what it does and say, yes, this one works better for what we do, this one works better for what they do.
correct,
And have input in that process. So,
correct. So,
So let me ask a question about case. Apart from NIH grants, or federal government grant, can you use it for foundation grants? Do you use it for foundation?
we do not.
Okay.
We do not,
Yes.
but we do use it for DOD, USDA, NIH, CDC. We do use it for CDC grants. For most foundations, a lot of them have gone to setting up their own portals now. So correct. Something like NSF, we tend to use the research.gov portal, and then there's Proposal Central. So there are all of the portals out there, PCORI, they have their own portal. So, but this is still good for those agencies that do allow you to do system to systems or grants.gov related systems. So you can keep your packages in one place and go back and look at them. Like we could search through Cayuse if we have access to the application. I think I have access from now back through, they purge it, I think, so I think I have access through 2016 when I looked. So I can see any applications that I have access through 2016.
we did for mentoring statement for a K award and my students is also, and I can pull.
Yeah.
Correct.
Example for the submitted.
The one things we don't necessarily do are just like pull the application and share them with, PIs without that primary PI submission, approval, right? And there are examples on the NIH website where you can go and look at applications as well, completed applications. But for Cayuse, I mean, these are some great functions, but I wanted you to kind of see how it was laid out, because then it also gives you like a summary of the application. We don't really use this page that much, but if you wanted to, you could see a summary, you could see any supporting documentation, which we don't need. Assigning permissions to the application, electronic submission, where you can actually see, you can look at the package and confirm you're using the right funding opportunity number, that you've pulled that right package. And if not, we have the ability to.
This electronic submission,
Mhm.
is it Cayuse that will update this for you, or you initially?
This is Cayuse,
Okay, so now you now confirm that this is where you are submitting to.
correct.
Okay.
Correct. And then you can go down here and you can actually see the proposal submission history, because this is a copy of another application. You won't see the history, but it would be right here in this section. And then, correct. And it would have the grant tracking number that you could use in ERA Commons. And then you could do a validate proposal with the NIH, as Jamila was talking about. When you select what agency, you want to be sure your validation is correct. And then this right here. Oops. Here we go. Okay, and it tells you what the target is right there. And then I can do a validate proposal over the whole application, and it should pop up. And then it would tell me where an error is, if there's an error or a warning. So we like it. We're excited to see what Insight System to System will do. And then we also have proposal history, which right now there's nothing here, but it would tell me everything that went on with the proposal. If I went in and made a change, took out something, changed the PI's name, and that's good for tracking. If you have universal access and somebody else has access to your application, you could see if you didn't make a change, you could check and see who would made that change. But for our purposes, we very seldom grant PIs access to Cayuse in terms of editing.
It's the tool, it's the interface, So a couple of things may happen. You don't want to have two people in that working simultaneously and changes don't save, or if things don't save, you think you did something, but it doesn't save into the system correctly. Or you say, I had to make a correction to an attachment, because like I said, sometimes when you convert something to a PDF, something happens, and something is lost in the format, and I've made a correction to the attachment and uploaded it to the application, and then the PI is like, oh, I don't know if this is my video, and they go, and they'll get errors. Where's the error? So that's the reason why you don't want to have too many records. Because it causes those kind of, unforced errors.
Yeah.
But you do have the ability to, do view access, and then you can print the PDF.
Correct. And that would give a research administrator nightmares if you've finished a package and you're thinking the PI is going back in and moving some stuff. And from a reviewer standpoint, which we are, it makes it harder because if you reviewed something and cleared it and everything looks okay, if somebody comes behind and changes something out, then you have to go back and review it again. So yes. So this is Cayuse. This is what we use. This is basically laid out exactly like grants.gov, and it is able to pass through the system into ERA Commons, which is what we want. Then let's see. And so you asked specifically about Science CV, right? So you said you have your My NCBI registration. Okay. Okay. And then you have your ORCID ID, right? And is your ORCID ID linked to your ERA Commons profile? Okay. So that is another step, that your ORCID ID should be linked to your ERA Commons profile. And then Science CV, you can get here through My NCBI as well, but it is logging in. You can use your ERA Commons ID, or I typically use login.gov because I feel it's a little bit more secure. So this is how I log in, but it's just going in, and there are prompts in here. No. Trust me.
Trust me, I have that door, and it's like, don't forget it, don't forget it.
Okay, let's see. But it kills me with the two-factor authentication, so.
Power without that, to log back into the system, it was like, I needed a two-factor, every single thing.
Okay, and so you'll come to your screen, and then all you have to do is create a new document. So right here, I have a sample, and if you've never been in Science CV, it's like a library of all of your bio sketches and other support documents. So once you create one, you can save that as your base bio sketch and then create other ones from that. So if I wanted to say new document, I could create, I could start with a blank document, or I could use an existing document, or I could use an external source, right? But the main thing is that, oh, sorry, I need to do this one. Great. And let's do just an image file sketch. And then this is the layout. Now it says older, so you can ignore that. But if you come in, it should default you to the new comments form. Okay. And then you would just fill it out. And at the end of this, let's see if I can get to my. This is my comment form. And so this is what you would see when you go in, and then you just edit the sections. And then the system does a self-certification. So this is why when you give it to that person, your final product, you can preview it, you can download it as a draft, but you have to certify it. And then when you download the final PDF, that is your certified copy right there. And you can't flatten it. It has to be that downloaded original copy that you're giving to somebody to upload, because now the system is checking for those certifications. And the same thing with your other support. If you have a lot of other support or a lot of biographical sketch information, we do recommend that you kind of start the process now before the final deadline for these to become effective. So that way you're not scrambling to get them done.
But most people have said, like, it's the setting of the initial one took a little time, relatively it's too much to give. But then after that, like, it takes nothing. You state your usage.
Yeah, I think one person said it took them about 5 hours for crafty. But in his defense, he was saying his other support. So he was saying he did his other support and it took him about 5 hours. So I was like,
copy and paste.
yeah,
It took him 5 hours.
yeah, yeah.
Like, I thought you were gonna say
No. Now, if it was Howard Chang, I'd be like, oh, that's an all day thing right there, right?
We have something are, especially in the particular department we started out with the fire statistician. They are not PI'd on a lot of awards, but they have effort in the awards across the university because they're doing, statistical work.
Okay, so let's see. Oh, great. Okay. Okay. So no questions about Cayuse, about the BioSketch. Okay, great. So then internal routing and approval, conflict of interest compliance, our export controls, which Shamila did touch on, final review and submission, the ERA Commons verification, and then post submission. Right. So let's see. So for Emory, and you can tell us for your institution, when you're submitting an application, how does your workflow process go?
So, the PI works with the grants director, so provides all information required from the digital side. What the grant actually finalizes budgets, but some aspects of the budget should comes from the PI.
Mhm.
So what's the grants? So what is going to separate both the technical and the financial?
Yeah, so we have the core and the science.
So the technical will go through approval of the final director or the chief executive to say, okay, I'm okay with this can go.
Okay.
So while the project should go through the chief operating officer to check finally. Once the grant units are finished, the passing through, just to do like a quick check to say, okay, I'm good with this. And after that, it comes back to the grants manager Kamar.
Okay.
He will be the one that will do the final submission.
Oh.
So he's the one that actually submits on behalf of.
Okay.
So that's okay.
Okay, so our process with the meeting with the PI, setting up the timelines and working with them on the budget is we route once the PI confirms that all of the investigators are in place who are going to be involved with this project. And these are Emory investigators who are here in place, but we have to have the final budget and the final budget justification. So our certification takes place in our Compass system and our Emory Proposal Express, and it's all electronic. So we don't have to email back and forth. We're uploading documents there. And it's the responsibility of the investigators and any co-investigators on that proposal to certify in that system. That's our first level. And at any time during this process, things can get hung up, and they do. But it's our responsibility as research administrators to make sure that we're following up with these routings and the approvals. So once the investigator approves, right, then it goes to their department. And at the department level, it can be the department chair or whoever the designee is in place of that department chair if they're not available. For us, it becomes a bigger routing when we have people outside of the School of Public Health, because let's say Jamila is an investigator. She asks you a co-investigator, but you're in the School of Medicine, right? So Jamila certifies, and then her department chair has certified. But you're going to the School of Medicine, and at the School of Medicine, there are about 2, sometimes 3 layers of approvals. So then we're following up on those 3 layers of approvals there. And it can take a little bit of time. And then if somebody has a VA appointment, that adds another layer in between the department approval and the school level here, because then it has to flow through the VA to get approval in that section. And if we have different things that are going on with the proposal, if it's, let's say it's a pharmaceutical proposal and it's a clinical trial, then that also brings in the Office of Clinical Research to that proposal. So these are all things that we have to take into account when we're routing, right? For us, the ideal proposal is that it's RSPH investigators, they certify, it goes to departments. We know somebody at the department level will certify, and then it will go directly to the school level. And at the school level, we have a 2-pronged review process. We have a primary reviewer who will review everything, right? They will follow up on the budget, view the science, come back with any questions, make sure that everything looks perfect. And then we have a second level reviewer who will come behind them and also check on any key points that we might have pointed out. And with the advent of Insight, we've added another layer because we're still routing in Epics, but we're also routing in Insight too. So that means that we're checking Epics against Insight, since Insight will transition to our primary form of routing proposals in the system in the future. And once we are finished with the 2-level school approvers, then it will move to the institutional level. And at that level, we have our assigned OSP analysts for the department. And then once that person has reviewed it, if there are any comments or questions, they're going to go all the way back to the research administrator and the PI. If there are questions, if there's something in the funding opportunity announcement that they have a question about, and then they're going back and they're saying, well, we don't see this, we need this done. And in some cases, they may return the proposal back to the school level for those corrections to be made. And then once the corrections are made, then the school approves it again, sends it back to OSP. OSP reviews it again, the analyst does, and then the analyst will send it on to whoever the authorized signer is. Sometimes it's the same person, sometimes it's not. It just depends upon what analyst receives it at that time. And then if all goes well, the analyst will either say, we've hit the button, we'll send you the confirmation shortly, and they will send us the confirmation from ERA Commons that the proposal passed through. Oh. Whoop.
Actually, remote to the screen.
Oh, is it just? Oh, how did I get there? Okay. And then if all goes well, then what we hope happens is that the button is pressed, it's before the deadline. The PI is expected, to go in, review the proposal, check in ERA Commons. If everything looks good, there's nothing else to do. If the PI says this looks slightly off from what I expected, the week before last, we had a PI who had a submission go in, and for some reason, their research strategy, when it converted black and white. It wasn't in color, so their diagrams, pictures, whatever, it didn't, and they noticed that and they said, I need to resubmit the research strategy to change it because these things need to be done in color. So we went back through the process, put it back in Cayuse, and resubmitted it. So that is the submission process. And the good thing about Cayuse is that Cayuse is submitted, but the package is still there. So you go back into Cayuse, make the changes, and the representative will resubmit that same package. Again, you don't create a new package. You just make corrections to the existing pack.
The former
Correct.
and it's certain.
Correct. You make changes to that package because, and we've run into instances where something has been submitted and it may be the deadline day, and it may be close to the deadline and a change has to occur. You don't want to create a new package because you want that same package to show it was resubmitted just as a second submission. So that way the system will see you're not trying to create something new. Because if questions arise, like you submitted it late, you said, no, it was submitted, I had to make a slight correction. And sometimes they will accept it, sometimes they won't, but.
And often we don't want to have too many, there's a limit.
Correct.
There, like 6 times a year.
Yeah.
No, it's like multiple proposals.
Correct. Um,
It may not matter as much of a fact.
Okay.
What, at the different levels, like what are the things that you check?
okay, yes. I don't think I did a slide for that.
No, it's okay.
Okay, so when we're going through a package, right, we're reading the funding opportunity announcement, the same as
I
the,
mean, the.
Oh.
Sorry.
Oh.
I didn't.
oh, you mean at the level?
Yeah. so-
Oh, okay. Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, so when the investigator sees the package, they're looking at, is the title correct? This is thinking from a PI. They're looking at, is the title correct? Is my effort correct? And they might be looking at other things, the questions that we're answering. From the department level, we have a department here where a minimum of 5% effort is required for those faculty. If there is less than 5% effort for their faculty on a particular grant application, they may require additional information from that particular investigator, why they don't have a minimum of 5% effort. For other faculty, it could be as much as, 10 or 20. We're also looking to see, let's say we have a postdoc who's submitting an application. If a postdoc is submitting an R21 or R01 or any R grant, right? We have to justify that this postdoc has the experience and the permission from the department and the school to submit as a PI on a submission. So those are things we're looking for. We're looking for things like, is there cost share, right? Who is covering the cost share? If it's salary cap cost share, we know that that is a requirement for grants where the salary may be over the $228,000, right? But if somebody wants to do voluntary cost share on their own, then we're looking at that a different way. We're saying, well, is the department approving your voluntary cost share? Do they know that you want to commit 5 or 10%? Because that is real cost to the department and things that we have to account for in those cases. Or are they committing resources? Is somebody saying, my lab is going to do this work for free, right? So that is non-salary cost share. Or I'm going to pay for travel for my student on my grant. Who's paying for the travel? What account is this coming out of?
Retrofit beer,
Exactly. And things like, is this equipment going to fit? Like Jamila was saying, is this equipment going to fit? Are we being realistic? And we have to build out a whole space. And that has happened before, where Emory has had to build out a space for lab equipment that they weren't expecting to have to build out. Unfortunately, I think things worked out in the end, but these are things that we're catching. And then we're also looking at, is the time commitment correct for them? For us, we have pre-award research administrators, we have post-award research administrators, but then we have pre-post administrators. We have faculty who sometimes overextend themselves with their effort. And in those cases, we want to be realistic. You have 100% here and your grants go for the next 4 years. This grant starts next year. Are you going to be able to commit here? Are you going to be able to lower an effort someplace? So those are kind of some of the things, if you know that particular PI very well. But this is why when we have meetings, we try to invite, if it's not a pre-post person, we try to make sure that a pre-award and a post-award person are in these discussion meetings about effort, so that we don't come to these particular things where at the other support, people are scrambling to reduce effort on all of these projects. We're looking at font. We're looking at margins, which is always a big deal for us. We're looking at hyperlinks. Now, with the change to Science CV, I'm glad to say that that's one thing that we don't have to worry about anymore because it's Science CV. The format is what the NIH said we're going to use, and there are hyperlinks there, but we don't have to worry about those stuff. We do have a lot of hyperlinks that are sometimes in bibliographies. So we are going back and forth to the PIs and we're saying, you know, this is an active hyperlink or URL. It's not allowed. If you don't really need it, we need to take it out.
They look at it as something that pages.
Mhm.
If you put in a hyperlink to be able to add different information for people to review outside of the page.
Correct. Correct. And the same thing, sometimes people try and slip them into facilities. We have a lot of core labs here, and people have a tendency to want to hyperlink to the webpage for the labs on the facilities document, and we gotta take it out. We can't have it there, you know. I've seen a couple that have kind of snuck into a research strategy. We have to take them out. It's just, you know, those things that we have to make sure that we're following to comply, because we hope if we don't catch them, that they also get caught at the OSP level, at the institutional level. So, what else?
The school level approvals are also looking for like indirect costs,
Mhm.
being correct, so they're gonna make sure, for example, you know, when an institution having collaboration between two schools, we're gonna make sure that the project for school medicine is set up correctly so that they're getting their portion of the indirect costs to their school the way they are supposed to, because the institution pays that at the level of the school, right? So we, as an institution, collect indirect costs of grant. We look at who has a project on that, and that school budget was to collect those indirect costs. So if there's 2 or 3 schools collaborating, they're splitting that those funds.
Yeah.
And they want to make sure that this is.
Yeah. And we've had arguments over not necessarily investigators. Let's say if we don't have an investigator for the School of Medicine, but we may have a staff person, right? We've had discussions about why don't School of Medicine have its own project? We're like, well, but this person is really going to be managed by our faculty over here in School of Public Health. So ideally, you don't need your project for this particular thing. So we have had those discussions as well. So it's a lot of, sometimes it's a lot of negotiation back and forth. And then we might run into a situation like, is it the American Cancer Society or I think it's the American Cancer Society, where the IDC is a certain rate, like let's say 20%. So if you have a sub, you have to negotiate. Like you can only collect 20%. You can't say the sub can get 20% and you can get 20%. That's a negotiation, right? Who's getting that 20% and how are you going to separate it out? Allowability. People are, you know, make sure people are allowed to be on the grant. What else did we talk about? We talked about the budget. We talked about just the overall guidelines. We talked about, we look at
Essentially, looking at their role in protecting their portion of the organization.
yes,
The investigators, when they're approving they're saying, okay, everything directly related to me is.
correct,
Approved. The
correct.
department is looking like, how is my departmental budget being affected by this? The school is looking like, okay, what is the school being committed to in terms of their budget? And, you know, what are you doing with our facilities in the building? And the institution is doing the same thing. They're looking at, from an institutional level, what is being committed here How does this affect, our schools compliance, opening us up to audit? So everybody is really at different levels, looking at, increasingly more broadly, making sure that we are.
Because the last thing you want is to come back and have an audit or, at the post-award submission stage, have your application rejected because you forgot something or you missed out on a component of the application. And we, as part of that, we're also checking dates, making sure all of that matches, making sure the budget that we're uploading to our Epics routing system matches what's in Cayuse. If not exactly, it can be off by a few dollars because there are sometimes rounding issues there. So these are all things that the reviewers are looking at, not just not just with fonts and margins, which is where a lot of our kind of like errors kind of arise when we're looking at these proposals. And let's say somebody is on a study section, right? They may say, I don't want to submit for this deadline that's stated like the February 5th deadline, but I want to do a continuing submission status, which is now April 10th. So we have to verify, does this person really have continuing submission status in order to submit this application late? Or are they just out of luck and they need to rush and get this application in now or push it off to the next cycle? So these are all the things that, that we want to be sure that are in compliance with Emory, because if we don't catch them here, we hope that they'll be caught at the institutional level as well. Yeah. Any other questions for this? It's a lot. I know it's a lot. What is our schedule for today?
I think they got a schedule until 4.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if we actually have that.
No, it's. If not, if we are true, we're true. No, well, I think I saw that we have other support time saving.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's somebody else presenting.
Yes. So you'll get some more information, but like you said at the break, if you want to work on linking your ORCID ID to your ERA Commons ID.
I'll probably do that.
Correct. So I did want to touch on a couple of other things. Let's see. So sometimes after you've submitted your application and it's getting closer to the review cycle, the NIH will come back to you and they will let you submit applications after the fact, right? They will say that you can submit bio sketches if you've had new publications added to it, or if you need to take somebody off and put somebody on, you may have to do that. Publications that weren't in print before but are now in print, and that also speaks now to the new policy whereby things have to be publicly accessible once they go to the publisher. I mean, like immediately. So you can't wait on those things anymore, which I know is a little bit taxing, but I understand what they're saying. Let me see if I can, here we go. So for the post-submission materials, these are some of the things that are allowable for post-submission materials. Patents, you have adjustments from changes in institutions, especially if somebody has transferred from one institution to another, which we've had. We've had people submit an application at one institution, get a job at a different institution, and then we have to do a transfer application. Sometimes an award is given to that home institution, but they may tell the NIH, oh, can you hold the application there because I am moving to a new institution and I want to move my application with me, right? So it may not start there at all.
It usually depends. We're still going to keep some portion of the work at that current institution. So if I've had people come in and say, well, I'm at a new place, but I'm still keeping, 2 or 3 co-investigators from my previous institution on the project. And so if they do that, it might not make sense to move the award. It may make sense to have one of the people at the prior institution just take over as PI for the issuance of something. Or it may make sense to do it in reverse. It just depends on how the project is going to move around.
And then if you have any, updates to any specific information, but you'll get an email from the PO typically before this is going to review. And they'll ask you if you have anything that you want to upload, and you can have your institutional representative upload this to ERA Commons for you. Or it depends. Sometimes they'll let you email it. It depends upon the PO at that time, right? And then at the last stage, once it's gone through review and it looks like your application will get a promising score. And I don't know, you've been through the just-in-time process, so you understand what we mean when we say just-in-time. And doing the other support documentation. And do y'all have a human subjects training program in place?
Do I have?
Well, at your institution, do y'all
Yeah,
have?
we.
Okay, okay. So for like the city certifications, okay, and sometimes they want a good clinical practice as well as part of that. So some of the new things that they're asking for are your research security training information, and that's new. And then the I don't know if it would apply in this case for just in time. I haven't seen it. The malign foreign talent. Correct, correct. Mostly they're doing that for the progress reporting. So I'm not sure if it would apply. They could make it a part of this, but definitely your other support, your human subjects education training and your research security training, I would definitely have those in place.
What is such security? I know the.
So
What is research security?
So this is basically part of what they call the CHIPS policy, and it's all about technology and the proper use of technology and research. And
Is training online?
there is actually information online, and you can have this. We'll get this to you because I have links in here for you. So you don't necessarily have to go back and try and find all of these things. And they actually have a thing online I think you can take. Let me go here to this link and double check. Yes. So they have a consolidated training module. Mhm. With tutorials and the module. And at the end of it, you just get a certification that says you've taken this training. And then typically right now at the progress report time, we're collecting these and we're saving these. So, but I'll definitely make sure you get a copy of this Word document so you'll have this. Okay. Are there any questions about this? I have a lot of things here laid out, commons, which you have at ERA Commons information. And the things that we look for are to make sure the entity is registered there. You know, that if you have your SAMS registration, it's flowing to ERA Commons because everybody needs the ERA Commons ID. In addition to having that linked with your ORCID ID for your Science CV BioSketch and other support, the tracking of your grant applications, submission for just-in-time information through the portal, unless your PO or GMS asks you to email it directly, your award, you know, progression site for reporting purposes, your trainee registration and tracking, X-Train and X-Tran, and then your site to receive your official notices of award for the NIH. Okay, and then for the NIH, this is the application guide section. And all of the application guides are updated periodically. They're kind of laid out. They tell you when they were last updated here. And then you can view them, most of them as PDFs, but then they have the general instructions. I would definitely go to the ones that are applicable to what you're submitting. So if you're submitting an R1, you definitely want to use the R application package. If you're doing a career development, that is K, training, T, fellowship, PDF, multi-project are the, you know, the U's, the, what else are they? P's. Those are the multi-project components, and now the PF5s would fall under the multi-project instructions. And then the SBIRs are basically small business application instructions. And that is all that I have, unless you can think of anything else, Jamila.
Will you share the Word document with those links?
Yes. Yes,
Worksheet.
yes, yes, we can upload everything for you. Are there any questions about anything else pre-proposal related? It's a video for other support, I believe. Yes.
After we have plus support, then we have a word set up
Oh, okay.
by Alina.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. All right. And what time was?
I think we're on break now.
Oh, you are. Oh, okay. Okay.
Feel like this should be lunch.
Yes. We'll come back by one.
Okay.